You ever notice how the VA always says they're modernizing something? And it sounds like good news. They throw around words like efficiency, consistency, and medical accuracy, like they're doing us all a favor. But then you dig into the fine print and somehow it starts to feel like the rules are quietly shifting again. Suddenly, that thing that used to qualify you for a 50% rating now only gets you a 10% rating. Or the claim that would have been approved last year is now not severe enough. It's like they're moving the finish line and no one bothered to tell you the race changed. Now, don't get me wrong, some of these changes do help veterans. Updating outdated criteria, especially for mental health, can finally give credit to vets who've been underrated for years. But others, they tighten the criteria in ways that could cost you thousands of dollars a year without you even realizing it's happening. And here's the part that really gets me. These changes don't come with a big red warning label. There's no letter in your mailbox that says, hey, this new rule could affect your benefits, you better file now. You just wake up one day and what used to count as 50% doesn't anymore. I'm Dr. Marshall Bahr, veteran, physician, and disabled combat veteran, and I'm someone who's been spent years helping vets fight through this exact system. Today, I'm breaking down what's really going on with the VA's proposed disability rating changes, especially around mental health, sleep apnea, and tinnitus, three of the most common and most misunderstood conditions in the entire VA system. We're going to talk about who wins, who loses, and why this matters to you right now, even if you already have a rating. Because depending on when you file, what evidence you've got, and how your records are written, you could either lock in a higher lifetime benefit or find yourself stuck under the new rules. So stick with me because I'm going to walk you through, step by step, how to protect the benefits you've already earned and the exact moves to make before these changes become official. And if you're sitting there thinking, man, this stuff is confusing, you're right. That's why I started Xterra Health, to help veterans like you understand the system, navigate it strategically, and get the medical evidence you need to win your claim the first time through. So let's dive in, because this one is one of those moments where being informed could literally change what shows up in your bank account every month. So here's what's really going on. The VA is in the middle of updating something called the Schedule for Ratings Disabilities, or as most of us in the world call it, the VASRD. Think of it as the VA's playbook for how they decide what your condition is worth in dollars and percentages. It's the system that determines whether your PTSD is 30%, 70%, or 100%, whether your sleep apnea gets you 50% or 10%, whether tinnitus is worth a monthly check or nothing at all. And here's the thing, the VASRD is old. Parts of it have been meaningful and meaning to be updated in decades. It was written during a time when medical science was different, treatments were limited, and the understanding of certain conditions, especially mental health, was miles behind where we are now. So on the surface, this modernization makes sense. The VA is saying, we're aligning with current medical knowledge, better diagnostics, and how conditions truly impact a veteran's daily functioning. And if that's what's actually happening across the board, I'd be the first one applauding. But here's where it gets complicated. The VA doesn't just rewrite a rule and hit publish. Every change goes through a formal process called rulemaking. It starts with a proposed rule published in the Federal Register, which is basically a government bulletin that 99% of veterans have never read or never will read. Then there's a public comment period where people, usually say VSOs, advocacy groups, and organizations like ours can submit feedback. After that, it goes through an internal review process where lawyers, medical experts, and policymakers tweak the language before it can become final. That process can take months, sometimes even years. And in the meantime, everyone's left in a limbo period. That's what's important to understand. When these new rating changes are finally implemented, they'll affect new claims and claims that are still pending when the rule goes into effect. If you already have a rating, you're typically grandfathered in. That means your existing rating can't be reduced just because the VA changed the playbook. You're locked in, unless they have solid medical evidence that your condition actually improved. But for everyone else, especially if you haven't filed yet or don't intend to file, this timing matters. Big time. Because when they say updated criteria, it doesn't always mean more generous. Some changes are genuinely good, like the new mental health model, which focuses on 5 functional domains instead of vague terms like occupational and social impairment. That helps veterans who are still working but living with severe symptoms. But other changes, like how they want to rate sleep apnea and tinnitus, those could quietly make it harder to qualify for the same compensation that veterans have received for years. So let's call it what it is. Some parts of this overhaul are about progress, and others are about cost control. It's not about helping or hurting. It's about redefining how disability is measured. And that's why you need to understand it now, because the rule will become law. Here's the translation. If you're already rated, you're likely safe. Your benefits are protected under the old rules. But if you're waiting to file or your claim is still in process when the new schedule drops, the VA can apply the new standards. That could mean a lower rating for the same exact diagnosis. So the smart move, the move that protects your future, is to understand these changes now, document correctly, and time your filing strategically. That's what we're about to break down next. So let's talk about what's really at stake here. Because if you treat these proposed changes like background noise, it could quietly cost you thousands of dollars a year. Here's what happens if you don't act, don't prepare, and don't pay attention to what's coming. Picture this. You've been struggling with sleep apnea for years. You finally get diagnosed. Your doctor prescribes a CPAP, and you think, all right, I'm finally covered. The VA is going to give me 50% because I got a CPAP, right? Except under the new proposed rule, that automatic 50% rating disappears. The VA wants to move every rewarding device and instead focus it on treatment effectiveness and end organ damage. So now that same claim that might have got you 50% is going to get you 10% instead, even though your symptoms haven't changed one bit. The only thing that changed was the rule book. And if you've already been waiting for months to file, you could be waiting and walking straight into a new system without realizing it. That 40% difference doesn't sound like much until you do the math. Let's say you're a single veteran with no dependents. A 50% rating means roughly $1,075 a month in $2025. 10% is only $171. That's almost $900 a month gone, or over $10,000 a year, just because the timing of your claim landed on the wrong side of a rule change. Now, let's talk tinnitus, the single most common service-connected condition among veterans. For years, it's been a guaranteed 10% rating, whether it's in 1 year or both. But under the new proposed changes, tinnitus will no longer stand on its own. That means if you file tinnitus by itself, no hearing loss, no vestibular disorder, you could get zero compensation. And if you do have hearing loss, tinnitus just gets folded in. There's no longer a separate rating. So instead of getting compensated for the constant ringing, buzzing, or high-pitched whine that's been keeping you up at night since your deployment, it's now just considered part of your hearing loss profile. You see how subtle that is? It looks small on paper for a lot of veterans. Tinnitus is the only thing they were ever compensated for often. Thousands of veterans receive 10% every month. Once the new change hits, that standalone claim disappears for new applicants. Now let's move into mental health, because this one's really big. For decades, the VA used vague language like occupational and social impairment, which left a lot of room for interpretation. But the proposed changes replace that with 5 specific functional domains: cognition, interpersonal relationships, task completion, navigating environments, and self-care. Sounds good, right? More clarity, more structure, but here's the risk. If your records don't show how your symptoms affect those domains, if they just say PTSD diagnosed or depression is ongoing, the VA won't have the evidence they need to assign a higher rating. This means a veteran who's been living with daily panic attacks, insomnia, and constant isolation could still walk away with 30% instead of 70%. Not because the condition isn't serious, but because the documentation doesn't match the new format. This is where most vets lose money, not because the VA denies them, but because the evidence doesn't fit the new rule structure. It's about the story. It's about how it's told on paper. Here's the reality. This isn't paranoia or a conspiracy theory. It's just how bureaucracies evolve over time. Rules will change quietly. Forms change wording. The standards shift. And every time they do, the burden of proof falls harder and harder on the veteran. You're the one expected to know the system, provide the evidence, and play by the new rules you weren't even told about. But here's the good news, and I mean this literally. You still have options. You can protect yourself by being proactive. You can time your filing strategically, document the right evidence, and lock your benefits before these rules become official. And that's what we're going to cover step by step. Because once you understand how these changes work and how to use the VA's own language to your advantage, you're not just reacting to the system, you're mastering it. So let's make this real for you. I want to tell you about Tom. He's a Marine I worked with through Xterra Health. Tom wasn't looking for handouts. He was a hard worker, the kind of guy who would rather push through exhaustion than ask for help. When he came to us, he was already diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea and using a CPAP every night. He'd been dealing with it for years. That constant fatigue, waking up gasping, headaches that never seemed to go away. But like most veterans, he didn't think much beyond. Yeah, it sucks, but it is what it is. When he first filed the VA claim, he got the standard 50% rating because he used CPAP. Simple, straightforward. That 50% made a big difference for him. It helped him cover bills, medical expenses, and even therapy sessions that weren't fully covered by the VA. But a few years later, things changed. He started experiencing heart palpitations, shortness of breath, and episodes of chest tightness that would wake him up at night. His doctor ordered an echocardiogram, and it showed early signs of cardiomyopathy, a weakening of the heart muscle that can be linked to long-term, untreated, or poorly controlled sleep apnea. Now here's where Tom did everything right. He kept every piece of documentation. He had his original sleep study showing severe sleep apnea, his CPAP compliance logs, those nightly usage reports showing when he used it, how long, and how effective it was. Follow-up sleep clinic notes showing he still had symptoms even with treatment, cardiology records and echo results showing that his heart was starting to suffer because of it. When we helped him file for an increased rating, we could show a clear medical pathway. Sleep apnea led to ongoing symptoms despite CPAP use, which led to cardiovascular damage, which led to end organ effect. That documentation told a story the VA couldn't ignore. It wasn't just a diagnosis, it was evidence. Because of that, Tom's claim didn't just get approved, it got upgraded to reflect the severity of his condition. He locked in that higher rating before the new rules went into effect, meaning even if the VA changes how they evaluate sleep apnea in the future, Tom's benefits are protected permanently. That's what good documentation and timing can do. They don't just win claims, they protect your future. Now, let me tell you about Sarah, an Army veteran I met not long after Tom. Sarah was tough as nails, 12 years of service, multiple deployments, and one of those I don't complain, I just adapt kind of veterans. But she had this constant high-pitched ringing in her ears, tinnitus, ever since a mortar round hit near her position in Iraq. She'd tell me, "Doc, it's like mosquitoes that never lands. It's just there when I wake up, it's there when I'm trying to fall asleep, sometimes it feels louder when the world is around me." When she finally decided to file a VA claim, she didn't have much documentation. Her audiology test was a few years old. She hadn't been to ENT in forever, and she never actually told her primary care provider how bad the tinnitus had gotten because she didn't want to sound like she was whining. She filed anyways, just tinnitus, no hearing loss, no other related conditions. Luckily, because she filed under the current ratings, the VA awarded her the 10% standalone rating that tinnitus has always carried. But here's the scary part. If she had waited even 6 months, she might not have gotten anything. Under the new proposed rules, tinnitus will no longer be a standalone compensatable condition. It will only count if it's part of another rated hearing disorder, like hearing loss or vestibular dysfunction. In other words, the exact same medical problem just filed at a different time could mean the difference between getting $165 a month for life or getting nothing. Sarah got lucky, but she shouldn't have had to rely on luck. If her claim had landed after the rule change, her story could have ended very differently. Now, you might be listening to this and thinking, okay, so Tom had perfect records and Sarah got lucky, but what about me? I've got gaps, I've got missing paperwork, I didn't know about all this stuff before. Listen, I get that. Most veterans don't, because nobody teaches you how to play this game. That's what I mean when I say the VA moves the finish line without telling you. The truth is, you can become Tom starting today. You can start collecting those medical records, downloading those CPAP compliance logs, updating your audiograms, and making sure your doctors are documenting your symptoms the right way. Not just the diagnosis, but how it affects your daily life. The difference between getting compensated and getting denied isn't luck. It's strategy. And strategy starts with awareness, knowing the rules, understanding what's changing, and getting ahead of it now. So you can either be Tom, the veteran who built his claim like a fortress before the storm hit, or you could be like Sarah, realizing too late the rule changes while she was waiting to file. The choice is yours. And in this episode, I'm going to show you exactly how to be the Tom in your story. All right, I'm going to give you 3 strategic, immediately actionable moves that will protect your benefits, and in many cases, improve them. After the first action, I want you to stop watching, get it done, and come back. Seriously, go do it. So number 1, you got to lock the clock. File or preserve claims now where the current schedule favors you, and document why this matters in plain English. The VA generally grandfathers ratings that are already granted under the current schedule. But new filings or pending claims when the new rules go live get judged under the new schedule. The translation, if the current rules are more favorable for your conditions, you want your claim in the system before the finish line moves. What lock the clock really means? It means filing a new claim under VA Form 21-526EZ or submit an intent to file today. The intent to file secures your effective date for up to 1 year while you gather evidence. Filing now preserves your place in line under today's rulebook. If your claim is already granted, you're typically safe or grandfathered. If you're still thinking about it, don't wait. So step by step on how to lock your effective date today, you gotta decide your path. Pick one right now. You either do a fast file where you already have records in hand, you file a fully developed claim on va.gov and upload your evidence. You secure your date and build your file. You don't have everything yet, say, you can submit your intent to file on va.gov. Usually takes about 2 minutes. Then gather evidence over the next few weeks. And if it's already pending, keep it pending. Keep submitting evidence. Do not withdraw just to restart. You want your claim pending when the old rules still apply. You also need to gather core evidence by condition. So let's say sleep apnea. You want to get your latest sleep apnea study with AHI, the CPAP. You want to download any compliance reports, get those from your durable medical equipment supplier or sleep clinic portal. Ask for 90-day and 12-month summaries. Sleep medicine and pulmonology notes, you want to get those stating the symptoms persist or what your CPAP intolerance is. You want to get cardiology and pulmonary studies if they are applicable, right? Like echocardiograms, EKGs, pulmonary hypertension. If CPAP is ineffective or poorly tolerated, you need to ask your clinician to document why. Is it mask intolerance, aerophagia, claustrophobia, persistent events? How about tinnitus? Make sure you get the audiology testing. Get ENT and audiology notes confirming chronic tinnitus and the onset. So, for example, noise exposure in service. What's the functional impact? A brief note on sleep deprivation, concentration problems, or hypervigilance. Get a lay statement from you or your spouse or roommate. Is it a constant high-pitched ringing since whatever year and noise event that happened? Does it interfere with your sleep or concentration? What about mental health? PTSD, depression, anxiety? You want to get therapy and psych notes. Don't just list diagnoses, describe the function. Share with your provider to include in the chart what missed appointments there were, what forget tasks you have, that you can't sustain focus for over 20 minutes. What about interpersonal stuff? Are you isolating? Are you avoiding crowds and family events? Are you getting easily irritable? Are you having a lot of arguments? What about task completion? What about, make sure you get documented any unpaid bills, any incomplete chores or projects, any discipline or write-ups at work? What about navigating environments? Are you having panic attacks in stores, avoiding unfamiliar routes, or having an easy startle response? And then document your self-care. Are you having hygiene neglect, skipped meals, medication non-adherence without reminders? And then make sure they include validated scales. And you can ask your clinician to include these, such as the PCL5, the PHQ-9, and the GAD-7, which are scores over time. And then make sure you get workplace documentation, such as accommodations, warnings, attendance issues, and if you're feeling safe at work. And then you need to file it all and feed into it. Upload all evidence on va.gov with clear labels, such as sleep apnea, CPAP compliance, 12 months, or tinnitus, audiology with the date, etc. Keep a running list of what you've submitted and what's pending. If you submitted an intent to file, set a reminder to convert to a full claim well before the 1 year mark. Here's a pro tip. This is where vets win or lose. Don't wait for a final rule headline. By then, you're stuck with it. Use lay statements smartly. These are the VA 21-4138 forms. They need to be short, specific, dated examples, and again, sweet and to the point. They beat long essays. Bridge opinions help. If a clinician can link sleep apnea to heart issues or tinnitus to service noise, ask them to write it plainly. And use language if you can, such as at least as likely as not. And what about durable medical equipment access? If your supplier won't release CPAP data, ask your sleep clinic or check your device app and portal and request PDF downloads. And what about when it comes time to C&P preparation? After you file, you're gonna have to expect a comp and pen exam. Bring a one-page summary of the top facts, such as timeline, flares, failed treatments, domain impacts. Be consistent with your records. Keep copies of everything. Download your va.gov uploads and receipts. If you mail anything, use certified mail and keep the green card. And what about if and then scenarios? To make things crystal clear, if you have sleep apnea with CPAP and no end organ effects documented yet, then file now to keep access to the current 50% pathway. If you have tinnitus but no hearing loss rating, then file now to secure the standalone 10% before it's folded into hearing loss. If you have mental health symptoms and thin documentation, then submit an intent to file today. Book visits to build domain-based notes over the next 30 to 60 days and convert your claim once those notes hit your chart. If your claim is already pending, then keep it alive and keep updating it. Don't withdraw it. You want the earlier effective date and the current schedule in your favor. So here are some common mistakes to avoid. Waiting for the perfect records before you file. File now, perfect after. Assuming diagnosis equals a rating, don't do that. The VA pays for functional impairment, treatment response, and secondary effects. Letting CPAP noncompliance go unexplained, if you can't tolerate it, get a medical note saying why and what alternatives you tried. If you've got no audiology before filing tinnitus, get a current test. It will anchor your claim. The same day action plan. So you want to do this in the next 30 or 60 minutes. Log into va.gov and again, submit your intent to file, the 21-0966 form, or start a 21-526EZ form. Email and call the sleep clinic, the durable medical equipment for CPAP compliance, for PDFs, get your audiology latest results, get your therapy notes, and schedule a psychiatry for a visit focused on these 5 domains. And write one concise lay statement from you and request one from your spouse or friend. Create a folder on your desktop, such as VA claim with the date, and drop every PDF in there. If you want help triaging gaps, schedule your free Xterra Health record review. The link's in the description below. We'll map what's missing and the best timing play. Bottom line, lock the clock now. Preserve your effective date and keep your claim under the current rulebook where it helps you most. You can always add evidence, but you can't rewind timing once the rules have changed. Next, you got to convert symptoms into domains and medical narratives. So documentation wins claims. So let's dig into one of the most powerful but most misunderstood shifts happening in the VA system, the new mental health rating model. Here's the bottom line. The VA doesn't want to just see a diagnosis anymore. They want to see how that diagnosis affects your life, your brain, your relationships, your routines, your ability to function day to day. And if you know how to play this right, it can actually work in your favor. Why this change matters is because for decades, mental health ratings were based on vague, outdated phrases like occupational and social impairment. That left far too much up to the examiner's interpretation. 2 vets with the exact same symptom could walk into 2 different C&P exams and walk out with ratings 40% apart. The new model replaces guesswork with 5 measurable functional domains. They are cognition, like thinking, memory, focus, decision-making, interpersonal interactions and relationships, such as how you deal with people, task completion and life activities, like ability to follow through, stay organized, and manage daily responsibilities, navigating environments, how do you handle new places, crowds, and external stressors, and self-care, such as hygiene, nutrition, medication management, and your daily living skills. The good news? You can build evidence for each domain starting right now. How to turn symptoms into functional evidence? Well, think of your record as a story, not a list of checkboxes. Every domain is a chapter, and your goal is to show the VA how your symptoms show in real life. Here's how to do it step by step. For cognition, this covers memory, concentration, and executive function. So, for example, I can't remember details from conversations, I forget appointments unless someone reminds me, I reread the same message 3 times before it sinks in. And then for your documentation, include provider notes, neuropsych testing, therapy sessions mentioning forgetfulness, or even work evaluations that show missed deadlines or mistakes. Here's a bonus. Ask your provider to include a PHQ-9 or a GAD-7 score trend showing your persistent cognitive fatigue or brain fog. Next, you need interpersonal interactions and relationships. This one often makes or breaks PTSD and depression claims. For example, say I used to enjoy spending time with friends, now I isolate, snap at people too easily, and avoid social events altogether. You want to include therapy notes on social withdrawal, spouse statements describing irritability, avoidance, or emotional detachment. And here's a tip. Short statements from family or friends are gold here. Like, since 2021, he spent nearly all weekends alone in his garage. He rarely answers calls or messages. Next, you got to capture task completion and life activities. This is where you show how your condition impacts productivity. So for example, document, my laundry piles up, I forget to pay bills, I can't keep up with work tasks. And you want to document this with employment records, missed payment notices, or therapist notes citing poor motivation or fatigue. The VA values consistency. If multiple records mention difficulty following through, it starts to paint a strong, functional picture. Next, you got to document navigating your environments. This domain focuses on anxiety, panic, hypervigilance, and comfort in public or unfamiliar spaces. So for example, document crowds trigger panic. I sit facing the door in restaurants. I avoid large stores. In the documentation you want are ER or urgent care notes for panic attacks, therapist notes about avoidance behavior, spouse statements about needing to leave places suddenly. And here's a tip. If you use coping mechanisms such as noise-canceling headphones, early morning shopping, sitting near exits, have those written down. They show adaptation to impairment. The last thing you need to document is self-care. And it's often the most overlooked domain. It's about hygiene, eating, sleep, and health maintenance. For example, say some weeks I shower once, I forget to eat, I skip meds until I'm reminded, and make sure you document it with therapist or primary care notes, statements from a partner or caregiver, and even photos and time logs if appropriate. And here's a tip. Mention changes, such as I used to exercise and cook. Now I live on and take energy drinks all the time. These changes tell a stronger story than static facts. Use statements to fill the gaps. Family, friends, coworkers, supervisors, these are your outside observers. The VA calls them lay witnesses. Their statements prove that your impairments are consistent and observable. So how do you write them? Keep them short, 1 paragraph each. Include a time frame like since 2019 and a pattern such as weekly panic attacks and an effect like I had to leave work early 3 to 4 times a month. So here's an example. Since his deployment, I've noticed that he rarely leaves the house after dark. Crowded spaces cause visible shaking and sweating. I've seen him freeze in parking lots because of panic. Those statements matter because the VA weighs frequency and consistency over emotion. I have anxiety is weak. I have panic attacks 3 times a week that force me to leave work early is powerful. So quantify your condition. Ask your providers to use validated clinical scales like the PHQ-9 for depression, GAD-7 for anxiety, PCL-5 for PTSD, the WODAS 2.0 or MoCA for cognitive function. Request that scores be entered in your chart every few visits so you can show patterns over time, improvement, plateau, or worsening. The VA loves trends because they remove subjectivity. Match treatment to function. So every treatment attempt tells the VA how severe your condition really is. Don't just list, I take sertraline. Document what happens after you tried it. Increased dose in April, but no improvement. Switch to bupropion due to side effects. Completed 12 therapy sessions, still can't sleep through the night. If you've had hospitalizations, ER visits, or medication changes, link each to how your function is changing, or didn't. That shows persistence and severity. And how to organize it all? Create a 5-section binder or digital folder, 1 for each domain. Label each file clearly. And it keeps a running log of medication, changes, therapy sessions, panic attacks, or missed work days. You need a 1-page summary of that log, and it often makes a CMP's examiner's job simple, and your rating will become higher. And why this approach wins? Because the VA is done guessing. They're not reading between the lines anymore. They're checking boxes of functional limitation. If your records already show how your condition affects cognition, relationships, daily functioning, navigation, and self-care, you're speaking their language already. If they don't, you'll be relying on luck and interpretation, and that's not a winning strategy. So start now. Translate your story into evidence. Get your providers and your support network documenting what your life actually looks like, not just what's written on a diagnosis line. That's how you turn a 30% rating into a 70% rating, or a 70% into 100%. That's how you make sure your claim doesn't just get heard, it gets understood. Next, you gotta build the medical bridge. Prove the causal links and in-organ effects for sleep apnea and tinnitus. So this part is where a lot of veterans lose their claims. Not because they don't have the condition, but because they don't prove the bridge between the diagnosis and the damage it's causing in their body or daily life. See, the VA doesn't just care that you have sleep apnea or tinnitus. They want to see how it affects you, how effective your treatment is, and whether it has caused or aggravated secondary conditions. If you can show that link clearly and with medical evidence, your claim moves from possible to probable, and that's what wins. So let's break it down, 1 condition at a time. So sleep apnea. building the bridge between symptoms, treatment, and consequences. So sleep apnea claims used to be simple. You got diagnosed, you used a CPAP, and that was an automatic 50% rating. But under the new proposed rules, the VA wants a deeper story. They want to see how effective treatment is, whether there's residual impairment, and if there's end organ damage, meaning your heart, lungs, or brain have been affected. So here's how you build that bridge. You need to collect and interpret your CPAP data. Every modern CPAP machine tracks detailed metrics. You can access this data through your durable medical equipment supplier, your sleep clinic, or even through the manufacturer's app. And request compliance reports for at least the past 12 months, ideally longer if you can. These reports will show how many hours you used it per night, the percentage of nights used, your AHI while on therapy, your leak rates, and treatment pressure range. Now, here's the key. If those reports show low compliance, don't panic. That doesn't disqualify you. What matters is the reason why. If you can't tolerate the CPAP due to mass claustrophobia, PTSD-related anxiety, or air swallowing, sinus pressure, or recurrent infections, have your sleep physician document that clearly. For example, in the note, it should say, patient is unable to tolerate CPAP because of claustrophobia and panic episodes. Despite multiple mask fittings and desensitization attempts, compliance remains below 4 hours per night. You see, that note alone can preserve your case for a higher rating because it demonstrates treatment resistance, not noncompliance. You also need to show ineffective treatment and downstream consequences. Say you've been on CPAP for months or years and still experience daytime fatigue, morning headaches, snoring or gasping events, persistent AHI above 5 events per hour, then the VA will want to know whether your treatment is actually controlling the condition. This is where cardiology and pulmonology notes become gold. Many veterans with chronic or untreated sleep apnea develop hypertension, arrhythmias, atrial fibrillation, or even cardiomyopathy, and those are considered end organ effects. If your doctor has ever mentioned those diagnoses, request copies of echocardiograms, look for left ventricular hypertrophy or dilated cardiomyopathy, get stress tests or EKG showing irregular heart rhythms, or pulmonary function tests showing reduced lung capacity. Then have your doctor connect all the dots. Veteran has long-standing obstructive sleep apnea, and it's likely contributed to cardiac remodeling and persistent hypertension despite medical therapy. That one sentence can transform your claim because it links a compensatable secondary condition directly to your service-connected sleep apnea. Next, what about alternative treatments? So if you've already had nasal surgery, or you use an oral appliance, or tried positional therapy, document it all. The new VA system places value on treatment effectiveness, not just whether you own a device. So if you've ever tried multiple treatments and still have significant symptoms, that supports a higher rating. So use something like, despite septoplasty and oral appliance therapy, the veteran continues to experience excessive daytime sleepiness and documented hypoxia. That shows persistence, which the VA interprets as functional impairment. Next, you got to link your daytime life to the nighttime data. The VA wants real-world impact. Write down how your sleep apnea affects you. I fall asleep at my desk by 2 p.m. every day. I've been written up for work, at work for dozing off at meetings. My spouse has to wake me up multiple times at night because I stop breathing. Have your spouse or coworker sign a lay statement confirming this. Those personal narratives matter more than you think. They give your claim human context, and the VA raters are trained to read them. What about tinnitus? You need to tell the full story before it gets folded in to the hearing loss. So every condition, every veteran knows. And that one is tinnitus, that constant ringing, buzzing, or hissing that follows you everywhere. Under the current rules, tinnitus is simple. If it's service connected, you get 10%, period. But under the proposed updates, the separate 10% rating could disappear unless your tinnitus is directly tied to another rated auditory condition. That means documentation just got a whole lot more important. So you need to get a complete audiology workup. Don't rely on quick hearing tests at the VA. You want a full audiogram with pure tone thresholds, speech discrimination scores, tinnitus descriptions such as unilateral versus bilateral, is it constant or intermittent? You need onset history, when it started and what noise exposures caused it. If your tinnitus exists with hearing loss, make sure your records clearly show both. If your tinnitus is without hearing loss, you must document how it affects your function. You need to also document functional impact. This is what most veterans forget to include. You need evidence showing how tinnitus disrupts your life. For example, sleep disturbance. I can't fall asleep because the ringing gets louder at night. Or concentration issues. I'm having trouble focusing in quiet environments because the noise is constant. Or mental health impact. The constant ringing increases my anxiety and irritability. Or what about workplace issues? I've missed safety alarms or radio calls because of the ringing. Have your audiologist or mental health provider include statements like, The veteran reports chronic bilateral tinnitus that interferes with concentration, causes sleep fragmentation, and contributes to anxiety symptoms. That phrasing connects tinnitus to functional impairment, which keeps your case strong, even if it gets tied to hearing loss under the new rules. Next, when tinnitus and hearing loss overlap, if the VA starts combining tinnitus into hearing loss ratings, you'll want your hearing loss accurately represented. That means your audiogram should reflect your true functional hearing, not just numbers. If your hearing test was done in a soundproof booth, ask your provider to document how you perform in real-world conditions, such as work, in crowds, on the phone. If you use hearing aids, document how much they help or don't help. And if your tinnitus makes it harder to even hear when your hearing aids are in, that should be clearly stated too. Like, tinnitus makes environmental sounds and reduces speech discrimination even with amplification. That keeps you from being undervalued and evaluated under the new combined structure. So here are some practical next steps. Here's what you can do even this week. Call your durable medical equipment or sleep clinic and request your 12-month CPAP compliance report. Ask for a PDF so you can upload it to va.gov. You need to schedule a cardiology checkup if you have chest discomfort, irregular heartbeats, or fatigue, and request a note linking it to sleep apnea. You need to request an updated audiology evaluation. Ask for a full testing plus a written tinnitus description and functional statement. Have your providers connect the dots, literally. Ask them to include phrases like, it is at least as likely as not that the patient's cardiac issues are secondary to the untreated sleep apnea, or tinnitus symptoms are aggravated by service-connected hearing loss. Add lay statements from your spouse or coworkers describing daytime sleepiness, irritability, or safety issues from sleep apnea or tinnitus. So why does this win? This is the difference between a 10% check-the-box claim and a well-supported, medically grounded submission that can stand up to any rater or appeal. When the new VA schedule arrives, they'll be looking for connections, consequences, and clear evidence of impact. If you take the time to build those bridges now, linking sleep apnea to heart health or tinnitus to daily functioning, you won't just survive the rule change, you'll come out stronger with a file that tells your story in their language. And that's the third pillar of protecting your benefits under the new system. Timing your filing, translating your symptoms into 5 domains, and building the medical bridges that prove cause and effect. Together, those 3 steps are the foundations of every high-value claim that holds up under scrutiny, and they're what separate a denied claim from a life-changing win. All right, let's bring this all home. If you remember nothing else from this entire video, remember this simple formula, the formula that protects everything you've earned. Timing plus documentation plus medical link equals protected benefits. That's it. That's the playbook. So let's break it down one last time so it sticks. Timing. The VA's rulebook is changing. Quietly, but definitively. And when those changes hit, the rating criteria you've always known won't look the same. If you act now, file under the current rules, and preserve your effective date, you're protected. You'll be grandfathered under the system that still favors you. But if you wait, if you assume you've got time, the rules could change while your paperwork sits in a digital pile somewhere. And you'll be judged under the new stricter schedule. So the first step, lock the clock. File today. Even if your documentation isn't perfect yet, get your claim or intent to file submitted before the window closes. And then documentation. Diagnoses don't win claims. Evidence does. Start building your story the way the VA is now trained to understand it, through those 5 domains: cognition, relationships, task completion, navigating environments, and self-care. The VA doesn't want broad statements like, I'm depressed or I'm anxious. They want the functional evidence that shows how those symptoms affect your daily life. If your records don't reflect that yet, fix it now. Talk to your providers, share this video, and explain what the VA is looking for. Get those functional details in your chart so when a rater looks at your file, they see the reality and not just the summary. And the medical link. Finally, you got to connect the dots. If you have sleep apnea, show how it's affecting your body through CPAP data, cardiology reports, and documented symptoms. If you have tinnitus, show how it's affecting your ability to function, your focus, your sleep, your mental health. Every symptom that exists in isolation is just a line item to them. But once you connect those dots, such as sleep apnea to heart damage, tinnitus to anxiety and sleep loss, it becomes a story of impact. That's what turns a partial rating into a full rating. So here's the reality. Most veterans lose benefits not because they didn't serve, not because they didn't deserve it, but because nobody ever taught them how to navigate the system. That ends today. This channel, this series, and the work we do at Xterra Health are about bridging that gap. If you want help identifying where your records are weak or when to file for maximum advantage, my team and I will do a free medical record review for you. We'll go through your file line by line, find the gaps, and give you a real strategy, not guesswork. So click on the link below to schedule your free consultation. It doesn't cost you a dime, and it could save you thousands of dollars a year. Because here's the truth, the system is complicated by design. But when you understand the rules, you stop playing defense and start playing offense. So don't wait for the new rule changes to go into effect. Don't wait for the VA to tell you the window's closed. Take action now. File, document, connect the dots. Protect your benefits before someone quietly rewrites the rule book. So if this video helped you, do 2 quick things for me. Hit that like button. It tells the algorithm to push this information to more veterans who need it. And subscribe to the channel and share this video with a brother or sister in arms who's still trying to figure this stuff out. We lose too many veterans not just to war, but to bureaucracy. Let's make sure no one gets left behind when the rules change. In my next video, I'm pulling back the curtain on something I've never shared publicly before, the 5 hidden VA disability claim tricks some people are keeping quiet about on purpose. These are strategies that can shift your entire claim. 5 moves that even many VSOs and attorneys don't talk about. We're going to dig into how to legally restructure a claim to strengthen service connection, uncover secondary pathways that most people overlook, and fix some of the most common mistakes that keep veterans stuck at 70% when they deserve 100%. You don't want to miss this one, so hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and make sure you're here when it drops. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of your brothers and sisters, and as always, stay mission ready.